you can see that the Pope's coffin is now departing Casa Santa Marta, his home for the last 12 years, and leaving the Vatican, and the procession to St. Mary Major is beginning.
Yes, it's almost like a Pope-mobile, open, white. It's actually a hearse, I think we can call it correctly, a hearse. There is no procession behind it. We've been told that the indications are that it will drive at about 10 kilometers per hour, so it should take about half an hour to reach St. Mary Major. Perhaps for security reasons, people have been asked not to walk behind it, but they will definitely be lining the streets.
And we've seen some of the images of the entirety of the group that you described earlier. Thousands and thousands of people have taken to the streets to say goodbye for the last time, and of course everyone will be able to visit St. Mary Major and visit Pope Francis's tomb. But this really is, the day that we are dedicating to him to say goodbye. And Rome, and not only Rome, the faithful have really come out for that.
Very symbolically also, we know that a group of mostly poor people who are assisted by charities will be at St. Mary Major to welcome him to his final resting place. The Pope of the peripheries, the Pope of the people, is very aptly receiving his last embrace from those who he loved the most, the smallest, the weakest, the last in society.
We see the whole entourage there from high above. Now they've just exited Vatican City. They're on the avenue here that leads to a tunnel that then crosses over the Tiber River and will take them into the historic center. People lining the streets there, and we've had plenty of reports of people lining the streets across the city since this morning. So while many were crowded into St. Peter's Square, which had at least around 50,000 until they had to kind of close it off due to the numbers, and then so many hundreds of 150,000 others in the avenues surrounding the area. We have many people as well, in addition, lining the streets or the sidewalks to pay their final respects to Pope Francis and the entourage here, moving at a pace that gives people time to take in the moment as it happens.
And these aerial images that were being shown are they're really quite impressive. They're beautiful. You can see the car carrying the Pope, and then above what I believe to be the Vatican Gardens, the Pope's Gardens, this beautiful green area which I'm sure he must have wandered through so often. And it's beautiful to have them both together as he makes his way to St. Mary Major. There really are a lot of people out there. You can hear the applause as he makes his way down.
You were saying, Francesca, the Vatican Gardens, which he probably walked. I thought it very beautiful that in the Vrogito, the last act, which they placed in his coffin, there was a summary of his life and of who he was and of his pontificate. And in particular, he was described as a simple and popular pastor in his archdiocese in Argentina, who traveled far and wide by metro and by bus, living in a flat, preparing his own food because he felt like a normal person.
And I think he made everyone he met feel like he was a normal person, and that they were meeting a normal person. And the Pope of the peripheries, that's really what he was. Especially talking about his traveling, and he really traveled the world. His penultimate trip, which Linda, you were on, and he really went to the other side of the forgotten side of the world.
Absolutely. I must say I've had the privilege to be on 2 faraway trips. One was the one you're just mentioning that took us to Indonesia, Timor-Leste, Papua New Guinea, and Singapore, but even the year before to Mongolia to visit the smallest Catholic bloc in the world, 1,500 Catholics of the entire Mongolian population. So yes, he travelled to the peripheries of the city, going to visit prisoners, going to visit elderly people, poor people, always welcoming refugees, but he'd also travel across the world to the remotest and furthest away places from the Vatican, obviously that is. And people always came out in floods to welcome him. I'll never forget landing in Timor-Leste, which is a tiny and new country, and the entire the half of the entire population, 750,000 people, came to the mass. Floods of people just there to welcome him. Very moving.
And they're countries that are so far off the grid, we barely even hear of them. And another gesture that was one of his final gestures was he visited the prison. He went to Regina Coeli, I believe, which is a prison in the Trastevere area of Rome, not too far from the Vatican. And it's a symbolic gesture that he does every year at Easter, and of course with him having been unwell, we weren't sure whether he would have done, and the fact that he did meant so much to prisoners worldwide, but all marginalized people. And I think the Pope himself said, you know, it could have been me, it could have been anyone in your position. And that awareness that he had and that he transmitted to the people who were suffering the most, I think is one of the greatest legacies that he could be leaving behind.
And it's really fitting that the people who will welcome him and say their goodbye at St. Mary Major are, as you've mentioned, the people who suffer, the homeless, migrants, people who are marginalized. So people who've met him before as well. We've been told around 40 of them will be there. There might be more or less, but some of them have actually met Pope Francis. Sometimes before going on an apostolic journey, or during religious feasts, he would have them over at Santa Marta and meet with them, just to...
He's crossing the bridge. He's crossing the Tiber.
We see, yes.
Yeah. This is the beginning of the Via Corso Vittorio Emanuele. He's passing here from some very symbolic places.
Indeed, and he's just, as you mentioned, crossed over the river. We saw that beautiful drone photography and that live video that we'll have more of here. And
yes, it's remarkable also. It's the first papal funeral, can we say, with this advanced technology, digital technology, that is really giving everyone the possibility to almost be there.
Indeed, for our television viewers, they're seeing an incredible view, bird's eye view, literally, of what's happening, and it gives you a sense of context in a way that's revolutionary, I would say. We have, of course, a vehicle preceding the entourage, or the
procession.
The procession, and you can see all the crowds of people on either side of the street as they wave there. And again, it's particularly poignant and touching that again he'll be welcomed by the people he's always reminded us not to forget, the ones who need our help, and the homeless, migrants, and refugees.
I must say, in these days in which tributes have been pouring in, again and again I've been hearing he was a voice for those who had no voice. Hopefully that voice will continue to resonate.
Well, right until the very end of his final appearance on Easter Sunday, he dedicated his words, his godly blessing, which someone else read for him, but he dedicated it to the people suffering war, and he has always been a voice for the people in countries where everything is being destroyed by arms. Pope Francis has been number one advocate for disarmament. He's been the number one advocate for solutions to be reached, for diplomatic talks to take place. He has reiterated every time he made an appeal that war is a defeat. It's become a slogan.
You have read so often for him at the general audience, which is always an occasion for him to reiterate this appeal. And Francesca, you wrote that lovely farewell that we published on the web about Pope and peace, which particularly, I think, resonated with you.
I have to say that one of the things I learned reading at Pope Francis' audience is that his style of being closer to the people resonated in every aspect of his pontificate. So it was very clear when he said the words. And then in other smaller actions, it was clear to the people involved. And this is the case for the general audiences, because you may remember up until a few years ago, the readers at the general audiences were all Monsignori, religious consecrated men who work within the Vatican walls. And Pope Francis changed that, and the readers became people like me. I'm a woman, I'm not a religious, not a consecrated woman, and all of a sudden that audience and that stage, which before saw only men, only consecrated men, saw people from all over the world, all different ages, all kinds of different accents, and it really represents the people in the square to whom you are transmitting the Pope's message. And I can only imagine that being one of the faithful in St. Peter's Square, which I have been on numerous occasions, even for audiences when other people are reading, it really builds that bridge. And that's just a very small gesture that people may not perhaps have even noticed, but to be involved and to be asked to participate in something like that, I mean, it's been a real honour reading for him for audiences.
And you're right, it may be a small gesture, but it is symbolic of opening a window that he's been doing more and more in his pontificate to include people in the church. You know, he's been trying to open to women. He's been so strong in reaching out to other religions, to other ecumenical denominations. I'd say perhaps this way of inclusion culminated in his call for the Synod on synodality, which is a process that is destined and that he has wanted to continue, which is asking the Church to include everyone, to listen to everyone.
And then if we just passed through Largo Argentina, which is literally right in the center of the Eternal City of Rome, historic Rome, as he continues on, heading coast now, coming up on Piazza Venezia. And all the crowds, incredible, lining both sides of the street. Again, they preferred that people not follow behind the vehicles for safety reasons, above all, apart from security. But
they're also going pretty fast.
Yeah, they're moving a little faster, but people are getting a good view of all. And just wanted to mention, you were mentioning the Pope appeals for peace. That drew a lot of applause during the Mass, the Requiem Mass, when Cardinal Ray spoke about that, saying how much the Pope has appealed for peace, worked for peace, appealed to the consciences of all people to do their utmost to bring peace in our world. And that brought rounds of applause from the crowds in the street.
And I think it was also mentioned in the Ruggido that you mentioned earlier, Linda, the document that was written and sealed within the Pope's coffin. It was mentioned some of the countries that he has dedicated so much attention and care to, I can't remember them all, but I know that one of them was Ukraine, another one was Palestine, Myanmar was mentioned, and it's true, these are all countries that when you think of Pope Francis and peace, you associate these countries to that. And
no, I'm saying we were talking about losing a voice for the forgotten. He was the only world leader who would never forget to mention ongoing conflicts that are completely out of the mainstream media. Myanmar, as you just mentioned, Sudan, the difficulties in South Sudan,
Haiti,
yes.
And countless, the list is really, unfortunately there are so many that we don't talk about as much as we should.
Here we are in Piazza Venezia. This is the altar to the fallen soldier.
And there are people all going all the way up the
Big
steps.
crowds there, big crowds. The larger area open there.
And now we're going to start going down what is personally one of my favorite places in Rome. It's the road that runs through the Roman Forum with imperial Rome on both sides.
There we've seen a lot of construction. They're extending
subway
the lines,
metro.
hence all the construction.
But can I say Rome is becoming more and more beautiful as works are ongoing to bring out its best, and there's so much, it's layers and layers of history.
I always think of how much Pope Francis loved being among the crowds, and in a special way he's here with everyone turning out, and his spirit is present here in a way in greeting and blessing the crowds, I'm sure.
It's so lovely also that he wants to be, that he obviously feels Roman. He's Argentine, but he's Roman. He's the Bishop of Rome. He's said it so many times. And his devotion to the Salus Populi Romani is so significant as well.
Even his parish visits that he would make on occasion, he would go to the most remote parishes, the ones really on the outskirts of the city. The idea of being to reach out to those who may have the least chance of seeing him or expecting to see him. That was his style.
And he'd go without a prepared text to engage in real conversation. I was speaking just yesterday or the day before yesterday to the international director of JRS, the Jesuit Refugee Service. And he was saying he'd pop into the Jesuit house in Rome and sit down and chat with them, and even about, like events that were coming up that had to be scheduled and had to be prepared. But he said he'd invariably come open to dialogue, open to listening to what others had to say. In fact, Brother Michael Shirk said he wanted to hear what other people had to say.
See these stunning images as he heads towards the Colosseum. We've just gone through the Roman Forum there. And the crowds are thick on either side there. We're going to have some nice images of the Rome's ancient Colosseum coming up, where he wrote shortly before he died, the meditations for the Way of the Cross. The Way of the Cross on Good Friday, the Stations of the Cross are takes place there at the Colosseum in a very symbolic and suggestive way, and remembering Good Friday and those who suffered and died.
He actually wrote the meditations himself this year. Very often they are written by groups of people, like symbolically, like by widows or war veterans or refugees. This year he wrote them, and he dedicated this year's meditations to the need for just economy, to the need to bring global justice to every person, every human being in the world, as we are called to recognize the inherent dignity of all.
Well, Pope Francis has often spoken of promoting an economy of peace and an economy of fratellanza, which is the word that inspires Fratelli Tutti. It means brotherhood. Fraternity. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. an economy of fraternity, and it is bringing together a lot of the things that we've spoken about. It's bringing together the poor and the marginalized and the people suffering on the other side of the world, in our case, us being here in the Vatican, who are suffering war, and often they're countries who are suffering economically, and it's calling to action and to responsibility the countries that can help.
Denouncing the great divide that there is between the rich and the poor. How often has he said all the food that gets thrown away by affluent societies would be more than enough to feed the millions and millions of hungry people in the world. And here we have a view of the Colosseum as he goes up via La Bicana.
Now he proceeds on via La Bicana here, and we're getting closer to St. Mary Major. There's the main road that goes between the Cathedral of Rome, St. John Lateran, and Santa Maria Maggiore, St. Mary Major. He'll be coming up on that via Romano there. And here, so we're probably about 2/3 of the way there, I would say. And again, Pope Francis wished to be buried at the Basilica of St. Mary Major, and he wished to be buried next to the Salus Populi Romani icon of Mary, who is remembered and venerated by Romans, as the Romans survived a plague centuries ago, and it's a special icon, a special place that people go to pray, and Pope Francis throughout his pontificate has gone there to pray, to give thanks, to ask for prayers for his ministry. So he's been very dedicated to Our Lady, in particular this icon there in the Basilica, and he will be buried next to that chapel where the icon is located. He wished to be buried next to it and not inside it, where there was a possibility, saying, no, I wish that people, when they go to pay homage to that icon, that they see only that, and they don't go there to go see a pope. So for that reason, he wished to be buried next to it in a space that is just perfect and appropriate, a simple space where we'll be seeing shortly.
We take it for granted that most popes are buried in the Vatican, and I think most of them are. I think there are about 90 popes in the Vatican grottos. But it's actually not uncommon for a pope to ask to be buried outside the grottos. But the last pope to be buried at St. Mary Major was Clement VI, who was laid to rest there in the 17th century. Other popes are buried in St. John Lateran, and even in places outside Rome.
In fact, Pope Francis has visited the Salus Populi Romani icon 126 times over 12 years of his papacy.
He entrusted every journey to her, every single apostolic journey he went on. And I also remember a very poignant moment of his pontificate, which was during the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, two particularly strong moments from that pandemic, but one of them relating to the icon of Mary Salus Populi Romani. He visited the Basilica, and then he actually made a pilgrimage by foot to the church of San Marcello, which, if I'm not mistaken, there's a crucifix there which survived a fire in the 15th century, and that was a particularly important moment because there was this empty Rome, and Pope Francis was walking down Via del Corso, which, for those of you who don't know, Rome is the biggest, most important street, I'd say, of Rome, which leads from Piazza Venezia, which the Pope's funeral procession has just passed through now, up to Piazza del Popolo. And just these images of Pope Francis walking down this empty street, and obviously to bring his closeness once again to the people suffering all across the world. And there was another moment like that, which was the Statue Orbi, which I'm sure you both remember.
We do, we remember. I think you were in the square that night.
I was in the square.
There were a few people.
Yes, because the radio where we work, has to be open every day and I was actually working that day, and I remember when the building was closing at the end of the day, it must have been about 5 o'clock. Pope Francis was just about to go out in the square, and Rome was empty in that case as well, and I made my way up via the Reconciliazione to the square, and I just remember it was raining.
He had that crucifix of San Pedro with him in the square.
Yes, he did. Yeah. It all comes together.
It comes
seems like
together.
such a long time
It
ago.
really does.
And our television viewers here can see we're back in the sunshine there. We were just on the Via Merulana. We went through a tree-lined avenue, very pretty. And again, crowds on either side. And as the street and sidewalk area opens up, more and more people are packed in there.
Now I know they're going to close the images once he arrives in front of St. Mary Major. He will be carried into the Basilica, but it's going to be a private ceremony there. So we're actually seeing the Basilica right now.
He's almost there.
Very
He's
close,
very
yes.
close.
Oh, here he comes
here.
now.
Here he is.
The images are being shown from the Basilica,
Basilica.
and he's arrived. I have to say, it's a very touching moment. It's almost difficult to know what to say.
I think most people can see and watch, but many people are also perhaps following on radio. It is very solemn, it's very sad.
At the same time, it's a celebration of his life and ministry, and it's particularly poignant in this Jubilee of Hope as well, that he inaugurated, that he opened. And so I think, I would imagine that would be the, and of course it is the key theme as well that we celebrate in a very special way at Easter, at this time of hope, birth, new birth, new life, life in a new and transformed way. So I think all today has been a wonderful tribute to Francis and his ministry. And there we see the icon, Salus Populi Romani. It's a panel made of cedar wood. It's about 79 centimeters, more or less. It's quite large when you bring it down to the ground. It's mounted in the chapel there higher up. And it depicts a half figure of Our Lady with the child Jesus in her arms. The icon again is especially dear to the Roman people, and highly linked to the identity of Rome and the Pope. So as we saw with Pope Francis, special dedication to Our Lady in this icon.
He visited the Basilica just recently during his convalescence at Casa Santa Marta after he was discharged from the hospital on the 23rd of March. He actually, on his way back from the hospital, he stopped to pay tribute to Our Lady.
We see those who are arriving, we see the cardinals and prelates who are arriving for this moment before the coffin is taken into the Basilica for this moment. Take this here outside.
The Cardinal Lengo Farrell will again preside inside the Basilica at the final rite of interment, together obviously with other cardinals and prelates. set on a stand. I don't call it a capital because Pope Francis specifically asked his whole right to simplify no capital on a stand about to be carried inside. Beautiful, beautiful facility.
And if I'm not mistaken, just before his interment, the coffin will be placed between those with the Pope facing the icon of Mary Salvus Populi Romani, so that he can say his final goodbye to the Mary that to whom he has entrusted himself and the world so many times.
It truly is a simple coffin. It's very simple. Cross engraved in it, tiny postmark,
I think it's being shown to the crowd, who, as you can hear, have applauded our final goodbye.
Let's take a session.
Abbiamo tutti qui davanti, mi può aiutare a chiedergli leggermente, no, ma anche lui, la polizia locale non ci arriva. Me lo chiami? Mi chiami lui, mi fai un cenno a lui. I vigili in bagno. Davanti, per favore, davanti! Davanti, per favore, grazie!
Always present for the Pope's protection. Never mind.
We're here at the Sistine Chapel Choir accompanying us as the offerings brought in procession into the Basilica from the atrium to the Basilica to be brought before the before being placed in the tomb that is it's a simple tomb bearing only the inscription Franciscus. The reproduction of the Pope's actual cross. Here we see the icon of the Salvation of the chapel of the ministry. Jesus, evangelist. There we see the coffin before the Pauline Chapel where the icon of Salus Populi Romani is found. We have some children bringing a homage to the altar there, above which is the icon of Mary. Behind the flowers Pope Francis would bring in homage when he would go there to pray before an apostolic journey or to give thanks or to for special prayers in his many visits there.
I think these must be roses that people have brought because they were single rows, white roses on long stems, and I think people probably brought those to their
I think there was a group of people holding them outside the basilica when the coffin was being built up. Now he's, as you
said, saluting Our Lady
and thanking her, I'm sure.
And now he's being taken close to the altar of St. Francis. The tomb is located just near them. We'll be taken to the niche of the side between, again, the Pauline Chapel and the altar of St. Francis. The private celebration is now underway in the Basilica, and as it is private at this moment, we're going to conclude our broadcast here. And we'd like to thank you all for joining us, and all of us paying tribute to our dear Pope Francis. That is shown signing off here.
Yes, we do conclude this live broadcast here. Of course, please visit the Vatican News website, Facebook, Instagram, X and YouTube accounts for coverage of all of these events. Thank you so much, Thaddeus and Francesca, for bringing your witness and your voice. And thank you also to our technicians, our audio coordinator, and to all our media partners, TV and radio, who have made this broadcast possible. And to all of you for joining in. Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be to Jesus Christ.